Hello again. Welcome back to the Electric Knight Workshop. Thanks for sticking around last time where we got all the parts pinned and test fitted before we moved on to the next section here. Now, there's a number of key sections that needed reinforcing and fixing, so I went ahead and did all that off camera. And one of the big things here is the buster launcher itself. It's one of the heaviest sections on here. Like this generator, that's a very heavy piece and it was only pinned in by one point here, and it was rotating freely when I was trying to test fit. Can't really have that with such a heavy section, so I went ahead and pinned all these sections up to make them a lot more sturdy. So I added a pin in to the generator here, so we'll slot everything in place, everything lined up, and there is the rear tail mount. And once it snaps into place, you can see that everything is locked in place now, and everything's all nice and sturdy, not loose, not rotating around, exactly what I wanted. So that's all fixed up. Has a little bit of rotation, but we can deal with that. Another thing I did is I went and added another pin to the mount section to lock it up as well. And you can see that that's nice and solid too. And with the orientation that I have it set at, the buster launcher will be nice and straight vertical, which is just what I was aiming for. Go ahead and grab that real quick. And as you can see, everything is nice and solid now. Gravity and weight is kind of fighting me a little bit here because everything's still kind of loose, but once we get everything glued up, this should be nice and solid. But already it's a big improvement over what I had before. Now, with how heavy this is, I'm still probably going to get some epoxy rather than just glue to make sure that everything is held nice and solid in place. But we'll get to that point once we get to that point. Now, the next thing that I fixed was the head. In particular, I was having trouble with these little two sections on the side of the head right here. You can see I added some clear resin up on top here, and that's because, as I get to the right side here, when I was test fitting them, there was an unsightly gap here, so I really wanted to close that up and make things nice and smooth. So we got the pins fixed up too, so everything will be nice and straight. It's going to be a little bit tighter still with the rear section put in during final assembly. But as you can see, everything snaps in place and it lines up nice and neat now. That's one thing we needed there. I also went back and fixed up the tail stabilizer links. I forgot to scribe these when I was doing the scribing, so I went back and fixed those off camera. Details a little bit more defined now. Now, there's still probably a little bit of heat shaping that I'm going to need to do once we do final assembly, but again, we'll get to that point when we get to that point. And the next thing that I fixed is the knee on the left leg. It was kind of popping off on me when I was doing test fitting, so I got the pin and the hole lined up a little bit better. And as you can see, it just pops into place now, and it holds solid, won't fall off. So that's all better. And the final thing that I went and did is reinforce the legs. When I was trying to test fit the buster launcher, the ankles were wanting to tilt back a lot, so I went and added a pin into each of the feet to zipper the leg and the foot together, and that solidified things up really nicely. As you can see, we'll test fit that. Nice and solid. Nothing's going to flop off on me here. A little heavy still, so we'll lay that down. same thing on the left leg. Nice and solid. So there we go. That's all the fixes that we got done. Now we can move on to washing everything. Alright, with our parts prepped and test fitted, now we can move on to the washing phase. Now, with resin kits, there is a mold release agent that is used inside of the molds when parts are being casted, so that'll leave an oily film on them. You might not be able to feel it, but it's definitely there, so you have to wash parts when you are building and painting a resin kit. If the film is there, none of the paint will stick, and we don't want that. So there's a number of different products you can use. I typically use a strong degreaser, something like Purple Power, or this degreaser here, or Simple Green. There's also specialized resin washes you can use, like what Gaia makes right here. This is kind of special stuff though, so I tend to use it for smaller kits. You can only use it 5 times before you have to discard it, so this is just out here as an example. So we're going to go ahead and use our degreaser here, and we are going to get started and wash our parts. Now, small parts I like to keep inside of a strainer, just to keep them from getting lost. If you're washing in a sink, you don't want anything going down the drain. And the bigger parts you can just set inside whatever you're washing in. I typically wash my sink here. I just want to make sure the surface is all clean before you get started so you don't get grease or food stuck to the parts. So we'll go ahead and get our degreaser. I typically throw a little bit in here, but I only have a little bit left, so we'll go ahead and use it up. I'm gonna need to order more here. Go ahead and add our water. Now with the water, you want it to be hot, but not too hot, because you don't want to accidentally warp any of your parts. Now we'll go ahead and set our parts in. And the thing that I like to do is I like to do one section at a time. That way none of the parts get mixed up. So for instance, I'm just doing the head parts right now, and then we'll move on to each section as we go. Make sure everything's all nice and covered. And there we go. Now with the water, we're going to let things sit for about 30 minutes, 45, maybe an hour. So we'll come back and we'll clean the parts after it's done. All right, everything's been sitting for about an hour now. So we'll go ahead and get our parts cleaned up. Now with degreaser, it's not really caustic on your skin, but it can dry it out. So wearing gloves is a good idea. We'll go ahead and grab our part, and just a toothbrush will work. Want to give everything a good scrub to make sure you really bite into whatever grease is on the part. Get all the surfaces. And you want to be careful with like these details on the front. You want to be a little gentle on those so you don't use too much force and accidentally break something. So just be mindful of delicate spots. There's details on the inside, so we'll clean that too. Give the head one more scrub on the top, just because of all the detail. There we go. Now that we've scrubbed it, we can give it a rinse. I like to kind of use a spray. Just make sure you get enough pressure on there to wash everything off. And there we go. That's one part scrubbed and cleaned. I'm going to leave this out to dry, and we're going to go ahead and get the rest of the parts. Alrighty. Now, I was getting ready to wash the Buster Launcher parts, but the longer I looked at them, the more that I realized that these two main body sections here are going to need joined together and have their seams removed. So if I join them together here, you can see that there is a big, nasty seam running all the way down here where these two parts join together. So we're going to need to clean this up the best that we can. Now there's a number of different things I was using. I was trying resin, I was trying regular putty, and it just wasn't working. So what we're going to need is something a little bit stronger. Now what we're going to do first is we're going to make sure everything's held nice and solid with super glue. And we're going to use Tamiya's epoxy putty. This is nice strong stuff once it cures, and it's easily sandable, so I think this will help remedy the problem that we're having with this issue here. As you can see, Tamiya's putty is a nice little simple 2-part epoxy, 1 part putty, 1 part hardener, and you just cut off equal sections what you need, and you roll it together, and it's easy to use, just spreads like clay. Now, looking at this here, it's going to need a fair amount of putty, so think about how much I'm going to need here, but for now, we are going to go ahead and get started gluing the parts together. That's our first step. We're going to apply it to the surfaces that we're going to be gluing together. So that's all 4 pins, plus some platforms and holes here. Doesn't feel particularly great, but this is the only way I could think of to fix this issue. Section here. And here we go. Slot them together. And there we go. All attached, no going back now. Let this dry and get some putty laid down. Alright, so even with everything held together nice and tight, glued together, you can see there's still an unsightly gap. Especially in sections like right here, this just does not look good. Now this section doesn't look particularly bad, but we'll probably still go ahead and blend it anyway, just to make everything nice and cohesive. This in particular is a pretty big step right here, so there's a lot that we need to fix. So we'll go ahead and get our putty and hardener ready. Now, this putty isn't toxic or anything, but it's probably a good idea to wear some gloves just because this stuff tends to get pretty sticky, so you don't want it sticking to your hands. So I'm just going to go ahead and get some gloves on real quick here. There we go. Now we're ready to get our putty cut out. So we'll cut off what we need, probably just about that much. And you need to mix equal parts with the hardener. So we'll cut off an equal amount. There we go. Now we'll remove the protective film. And this stuff's pretty staticky too, so it tends to kind of stick to you. Put the putty here. And then we're going to start twisting and kneading it together. Just keep on going until everything's a nice solid color, no stripes. As you can see, once we get a nice solid color, everything's mixed properly. I can start tearing chunks off that we need. And another little tip that you can do to cut down on the stickiness is dip it in water. This helps with shaping it, and it also helps prevent it from sticking to you, which is especially helpful with the gloves on. So once we're ready, we can roll it out. And then we'll just start tucking it into the gaps that we need to fill. There's a number of different tools you can use. I'm kind of limited right here, but I have my toothpick that I'm using to kind of press it into place. Use some water to help shape it. Shaping it till it's nice and smooth. And here I'm also using my embossing tool. Again, I'm kind of limited on the tools that I have, so you just kind of need to make do with what you have, but there are sculpting tools that would make this a whole lot easier. I actually ended up picking some up after I got this done. But once we get everything all filled in, as you can see, all of our gaps are taken care of. Not the prettiest, but everything's all nice and covered up. Like this section right here, there was a big step there that I wanted to get rid of, so I'm going to try and smooth that out. I'm going to to take a lot of sanding, but I think that'll look a lot better. In addition, I had to be careful around, like, say, these little details right here. Didn't want to cover anything up, so we were careful around there. Made sure to maintain everything. Yeah, everything is all nice and filled in. Now, with this Tamiya epoxy putty, it's got about a 12-hour drying time, so we're probably going to be safe and let it dry for a day or two before we come back and sand, once it's all dry. And after a lot of sanding, everything is all nice and smoothed out. Now, it's not 100% pretty just yet. Again, I'm kind of limited on some of my tools that I needed or had at my disposal, so there might be some issues that pop up when we lay the primer coat down, but this is all nice and smooth now. As you can see, it's almost like glass, so that's a lot better than what it was. Everything looks a lot better. Now with that, we're going to go ahead and get all these parts washed and ready to go. Now then, all the body parts have been washed. These have been drying for the past couple days while I was working on the Buster Launcher. So with those done, we can move on to the Buster Launcher parts themselves, get them all cleaned up. I also got the front cod piece in, had to do a little bit of patchwork on this little hook section right here. It was cracked, so we filled that in, we'll rewash it. We'll go ahead and get everything cleaned. Now the Buster Launcher body itself, it's really long being glued together like that, so we're going to need to set it in the sink, clean it one half at a time. We can put our larger parts in. And our basket of parts. Mount. And the generator. Let those sit. Now you may notice that the degreaser is a little different here. That's because I had to switch up my degreaser. I'm using Simple Green here. It works just as good as any other degreaser. It's a high strength degreaser, so it works really, really nicely. So we're going to go ahead and let these sit. Make sure they're covered properly. Need a little bit more water. And looking at that Buster Launcher body, it's not going to be able to be washed right now, so probably going to have to remove that. Take it out because I need to fill the sink up entirely. So we'll set that aside for now. So we're going to let these other parts soak. We'll come back and clean those up, and then we'll take care of washing this main Buster Launcher body here. So just let it sit for about an hour, and with them all cleaned, you can come in and commence the scrubbing. Get our water going, get the toothbrush, scrub everything off. Same as on the body parts. Make sure you get all your surfaces. And the mount section is going to be painted inside, so make sure to scrub the insides out too. And rinse. Okay, one part down. Going with all the other parts. Got that Buster Launcher barrel. There's a section I need to drill out too, so we'll go back and get that later. And that takes care of all the small parts. Now we can take care of the Buster Launcher body itself. And this, we're going to need to fill up the sink entirely, so get some hot water going and let that fill up all the way. Let that sit for about an hour as well, and flip it and do the other side. And there we go. Everything is all cleaned and scrubbed off. We're going to let these dry for about 24 hours, and then we will finally be ready to move on to the next section, which is going to be priming and checking the surface for errors. Alrighty, with everything all washed and cleaned, now we can move on to priming the parts. Now there's a little bit of prep work we have to do before we actually start spraying, with making sure everything is covered up. with these recessed areas here, and the raised areas, and anything that's going to get glued, we want to make sure that there's no paint or primer in between. When you're gluing stuff together, you want to make sure it's resin to resin. You don't want paint layers in between, otherwise it'll enable the parts to separate because the glue isn't penetrating the resin like it's supposed to. So we're going to do a little bit of prep work first. There's a number of materials that you can use to make sure everything's all masked properly. One of my go-to things is sticky tack, pretty versatile. There's tape you can use, thin stuff, or you can use some thicker tape for larger areas. And for really large areas, I'll use blue painter's tape. Now, the Tamiya stuff is craft grade and made for going on model paint, but the masking tape, like the blue stuff, isn't. But we're really not worried about paint at this point, so we can go ahead and use that. So to get started on our masking here, we'll probably use a little bit of sticky tack on this recessed area. Just roll it out, just like putty. And we're going to go ahead and press it down into place, and that'll mask the hole up. There's that. We can wrap some masking tape around the pins because we don't want to get glue on those either. And on this raised area, we can use some regular masking tape. Tear it to fit. We're just going to cover up that nice flat area right there. There we go. Those are some basic examples of how you can mask parts for priming and painting as well. So we got a fair bit of work to do. All the parts are going to need this done to them, and even on this I still have a bunch of other sections that we need to do. So we'll go ahead and take care of all those other sections, and we'll be right back. Alright, everything has been masked up. Got all the little sections covered that I don't want to get paint or primer on. And now we are finally ready to spray. Now this first coat here is just going to be kind of a little primer guide coat. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be inspecting all of the parts. The main thing we're going to be looking for and focusing on is like any pinholes or defects, just things I might not have been able to see or miss when I was sanding initially. The stuff that I like to use is Mr. Surfacer 1000. It's got a nice coarse grit in it, and that's kind of what you want because resin's more of a porous material. So you want something with a bit of bite to it, and that's what this stuff has. There's Mr. Surfacer 1500, but that's a little bit on the smoother side, so I tend to stick to this stuff when it comes to resin kits. Now, I have my bottle pre-mixed here, but this Mr. Surfacer is not thinned out of the bottle, so if you were to try and spray it, it'd just goop up your airbrush. So this Mr. Color Leveling Thinner is a very good product to have on hand. It's got a leveling agent inside of it that makes your finish nice and smooth. And whenever I mix this together with Mr. Color Paint or Mr. Surfacer Primer, I mix it 1-to-1. So it's half primer, half thinner in this bottle. So we'll be using that mixture whenever we need more. But this stuff's all ready to go, so we're going to go ahead and get it sprayed down. Alright, we're at the booth here, and we're all ready to start spraying. It's just a little cheap Amazon spray booth that I have. It has a vent going out the window, fan powered. You always want to be sure that you're venting to the atmosphere whenever you're spraying and painting. And the airbrush that I have is an Iwata Eclipse HPCS, just a nice little dual action airbrush. And my compressor is an Iwata PowerJet Pro. A little overkill, but it works. Alright, now for painting the parts themselves, I like to use these little alligator clips to hold on to pins where I can. Snap on right there, and with that, it enables you to rotate the part and spray in whatever angle you need to. And when the parts are ready to dry, I set them on this little base here, and they dry. Now the smaller parts that don't have a pin, I like to put some sticky tack inside, and I'll take the edge of the alligator clip, stick it inside the sticky tack, and it usually is strong enough to hold the part in place. Simple, but it works. These larger parts, they're way too heavy to put on alligator clips, so we're going to need to paint them half and half. So we'll get this first half, let dry, and get the other side. A little clunky, but that's how it's going to have to work. And one last thing before we get started here, we have our primer that has separated from sitting for a while, this little pre-mix that I have. So we need to mix it back up, make it ready to use. I'm going to go ahead and use a paint mixer here. You can shake the bottle, but I have this little wave mixer. Seen a lot of use, a little beat up, but it still works pretty good. Just use it to stir up the paint. Make sure it's good to go. I like to clean off the mixer, make sure no paint gets stuck to it. Our airbrush on and ready to go, spraying air. We can go ahead and add our primer to the mix. Fill up our cup. And we are finally ready to spray. Do a little test spray here. Make sure the airbrush is working properly before we start spraying. Looks good. One last thing that I like to do, since these parts have been sitting out for a while, is use a little model brush, like a Tamiya anti-static brush. You just give it a light little dusting real quick. Make sure any hair or dust is cleaned off of it for a nice clean surface. There we go. And with that, we can finally start laying some primer down. Now we're only going to do a light primer coat, because like I said, this is an initial guide coat to check for any issues. So we're going to be a little conservative on our primer here. We'll go ahead and give it a spray. Make sure everything's covered, but don't go too heavy on the primer. Okay, there we go, that should do. A little bit of touch-ups around the edges. There we go, that should do for now. That's one piece down. Now, might be a little hard to see. Might need to zoom in here. If we look closely, you can see that there's a little pinhole on the edge of the mask right there that we'll need to fill in. So those are little defects that we're looking for that we'll need to fix. We're going to go ahead and take care of the rest of the parts and go from there. Now this part's another good example of why you do a guide coat first. It might be a little hard to see on this front side here. You can see, if you look kind of close, there's a spot where my scriber kind of slipped, made a scratch. So I need to fix that. I don't know if you can kind of see it, but it's there. On top there, where we laid the resin down, it went over the top and made a big mess. So we need to go down and smooth that out. There's some scratches there. There's a little divot right there that we need to fix. On the bottom side, there's a mold line that we missed that we need to file away. And on the bottom side, actually, the panel lines look pretty good. Looks like those turned out pretty nicely, so those are good. But those are all sorts of little errors that we need to fix, and that's half the purpose why we're doing this guide coat to begin with. I've gone through a lot of these parts here, and I've used up the primer. As you can see, my bottle's totally empty, so we need to mix some more. Now we got our thinner, and our primer. And as noted earlier, we're going to do a 1-to-1 mixture. These Gaia bottles have milliliter measurements on the side, makes it very easy to guess what mixture you need to set your fill at. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and do a 1-to-1 mixture. We go up to about 30 mil, and then maybe around here to get it to around 60. Might be a little bit over, but a little bit thinner is okay. Now, the thing I like to do is use a toothpick when I'm pouring. So as you can see, when you pour out, you don't have to worry about spilling all over the place. Your pour will just run right down the toothpick and into the bottle. Any little trick I learned a little while ago. Go ahead and get up to the 30 ml line. There we go. Clean that off, set it aside. Use the same toothpick for the thinner. When the thinner runs down, it'll wash off all that primer on the toothpick. Go ahead and fill it up the rest of the way. .45 up to 60, somewhere around there. A little bit more and perfect. There we go. Now with our ratio fully set, go ahead and mix. There we go. Everything's all mixed, ready to spray again. Now, I've been using this Mr. Surfacer 1000 for priming most of the parts. However, there's a couple parts that we need to use something of a different approach to, which is the Lachesis and Latios soap figures here. These are character figures, so I want to have the colors be a little bit brighter because your primer actually affects what brightness your colors are going to pop out at. So Tamiya, as well as Mr. Surfacer, they make white primers. And there's also black primers you can get too, but you can get these in a can if you don't feel like spraying them out of an airbrush. So I have this laying around. We're going to use this on these character figures. Give them a nice bright base to make the colors pop out once we get them painted. So I'll get my glove on. Give them a dusting. Spray can, you want to give them a good shake before you start spraying. Test spritz. This stuff comes out pretty heavy, so you want to make sure you're holding the part a little ways back from your spray can, and just give them light little spritz coats. As you can see, you spray, 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 spray. You just want to hold the nozzle down. Keep your coat kind of light. So we're just trying to build this up slowly on the figure. See, she's already turning a nice shade of white. This will also give us a good base for our paint to bite into once we start hand painting. Good first coat. Set Lachesis aside and get Latios. Get them all touched up. The same approach, just little spritz coats. Especially with this being a white primer, it kind of builds up slowly, so you don't want to overdo it. It does dry pretty quick, so just letting it sit for a minute or two is usually enough to do another coat. See, we're going back to Lachesis here to give her her second coat. Make sure she's fully coated. Underside of her skirt. Of her legs, underneath of her shoulder pads. Make sure everything's nice and coated. And there we go. That's how you use spray can primer. So we'll let her dry, go back and get that spot on the legs, and they'll be all done. Alright, everything finally has the first guide coat laid down, and there are a number of defects that have popped out at me here that we need to go back and fix. It's like at the back of the leg. If you look on these little engine covers here, you can see there's pinholes that need filled. On this ankle guard, at the surface, you got all sorts of dents and divots, pinholes that need fixed. There's all sorts of little things we need to go back and take care of. So it's a little unfortunate, but got some tools that should make things a little bit easier. Got these angle files. They'll come in handy for getting inside nooks and crannies. And we have some Tamiya white putty that we're going to be using to touch up these holes here. And with that, I got some sanding sponges, because mine were kind of worn. And these carving tools will help get the putty inside of those little tight spaces and make sure the holes are filled. So we're going to be going and doing that. Maybe going to be doing some streams here and there, but we're going to make sure everything's all nice and fixed up before we put the second primer down and move on to paint. So thanks for sticking around. See you next time.